Tonight we conclude our examination in the world religions by looking at beliefs and rituals found in Shintoism, Mormonism, and the Baha'i faith. So we will start with Shinto. Shinto is the indigenous spirituality of Japan and the Japanese people. It's a set of beliefs and practices that establish a connection between present-day Japan and its ancient past. The word Shinto, translated, means way of the gods. It was adopted from the written Chinese, combining Shin, meaning spirit, and To, meaning path or study. So the way of the gods or the way of the spirits. Shinto practices were first recorded or codified in the 8th century. Now, when a lot of people think of Japan, they think of Buddhism. And that's true. Buddhism is perhaps the most dominant religion. But behind all of it is the Shinto tradition, the original indigenous religion. Shinto practices were recorded, like I said, in the 8th century. They revolve around two major concepts. Worship of spirits, known as kami, K-A-M-I. There it is in Japanese, and ideas related to pollution and purification. So let's look at kami a bit. Sometimes translated as God or deity. Scholars argue, however, that such a translation gives a little bit of a misunderstanding of the term. In some instances, kami are personified deities. That would be true, similar to the gods, let's say, of ancient Greece or ancient Rome. In other cases, they are spirits dwelling in nature. These are the kami spirits in nature. Shinto is very close to nature. Very close in terms of its seeing the spiritual, not just in human beings, but in natural objects, natural phenomena. For example, wind and thunder have kami spirits. Mountains, rivers, trees, rocks, animals have spirits. And how do we see this spirit? By the energy. The energy is the spirit that is seen in all of existence, especially in nature. So Shinto, early on, individuals feel very close to nature. Somewhat similar, perhaps, to Native Americans and their closeness to nature here. But there are also ancestral spirits. The ancestors. When the ancestors die, they don't just disappear. Their spirits are believed to exist, and they are always around. And when you have religions that have ancestor worship, you will automatically have rituals related to how you connect with those ancestors. For example, here's the imperial kami of, this is the line of the imperial house of Japan since 1831. All the ancestors, they are called kami. So like if you took the English monarchy, and you traced all the way back to, they were all kami. They all have spirits. And but every family has its kami, its spirits. And nearly every Japanese house, whether Buddhist or Shinto, will have a shrine like this, where you make offerings to the ancestors. When we were in Japan, we saw these. When we came back, we thought it was a good idea. We got pictures of all the relatives as far back as we could. In one of my closets in my study, we have a little shrine, and we have all the pictures around it. So as I look over, as I'm writing, sometimes I see my dad looking at me. So yeah, the idea that there are ancestor spirits as well. I haven't gotten to death yet, but I wanted to give you a little feel for Shinto first. There are other spirits, those who are heroes, men of outstanding deeds or virtues who have contributed to the culture or to the Japanese nation or people. You might find this interesting. At the end of World War II, these young kamikaze pilots are considered kami. There's a great shrine in Tokyo to the war dead, and there's a special room for the kamikaze pilots. I think I've told you, I've read, when these young guys would take off, and I don't like praising war in any way, but sometimes there's stuff that's sort of moving, even within war. These guys would take off, they knew they weren't coming back, and they would write letters to their parents. They would write their farewell letter. And some of them are just really moving. I've got a whole collection of them. And they went off, said, you know, we're dying. Thank you for raising us. Thank you for making us good Japanese. Anyway, so kami can also be heroes. So in order to please the kami, in Shinto you have 4 affirmations, and this will get us to death. Maintaining tradition through the family. Very important. Japanese family. That's how you remain your tradition. You honor your spirits of your dead and your living. Love and respect for nature. Great feeling for nature. If you've ever been to Japan and you see just the way people deal with nature, it isn't just out there, it's part of who you are. And then this last part, maintaining purity. And that leads us to the importance given to purity and impurity, which, can you see how death is going to tie into this? Death is a great impurity, and we'll see why. So, and I should mention here, we have these beautiful shrines. If you've ever been to Japan, I think there are over several thousand. There are almost as many Shinto shrines in Japan as are McDonald's in the U.S. So it's from small shrines, neighborhood shrines, to just magnificent shrines. And this all ties in with the kami. So purity and pollution, very strongly held in Shinto belief. And sometimes it's considered, purity is considered more important than what we would call ethical action. In fact, wrong deeds are called impurities. If you do something wrong, it's an impurity from which one needs to be cleansed rather than violations which one needs to be punished. Okay. So it's this idea of, if you've done something wrong, you have engaged in an impurity and you have to be made pure again through ritual. And that's part of the religious connection, rather than just, now they do have their legal system, etc. I'm not saying that. But this is a fundamental idea here of purity and impurity. The emphasis has created a category of impure substances, including various body fluids, dirt, and decay. Decay meaning death. So the dead body is considered impure. Remember how in Zoroastrianism that was very much the idea too, that this is an impurity. Thus death and conditions associated with it are a major impurity. How did that come about? Well, there's a myth. I'll tell it to you. It goes back to this myth of Izanagi and Izanami. These were 2 kami, more like the Greek gods, who created the islands of Japan in the myth. They stood on a bridge called the Universal Bridge, and then they put their spears down in the water, and as they raised them up, the islands dropped. It's just a little side story. When we were in Hiroshima a few years back, we were at this beautiful park, and there was a model of this bridge in the park. When the atomic bomb dropped, that park was completely annihilated, except the bridge. For some reason, that bridge remained. And they have photographs of it. It's amazing. You stand in this gorgeous park, and then you see this photograph, because the bomb hit only a couple miles away from that spot. And you know, the bomb didn't hit on the ground. It was exploded above. That was part of the process. You know why? All the energy, and throw up all the all the dirt and stuff into the air, which is radioactive. So yeah, I think it exploded a quarter of a mile above the Earth. It didn't hit the Earth and explode, but it was designed to do that. In any case, this bridge, so they're known for this. So Izanami, that's the female, died giving birth to a child, and she was buried at a place called Mount Hiba, which is in southwest Japan. And that is known as the gate to Yomi. Yomi is the underworld. Okay, you can actually go there today and visit that spot. So according to the myth, she died giving birth, and she went to Yomi. And Izanagi followed her. He followed her to try and get her back. But he found a suffocating darkness which made him ache for life and light. So he's gone down into this darkness. He's searching for his dead wife. He searched and he found her. At first, Izanagi could not see her clearly because she was hidden in the shadows. Nevertheless, he asked her to return with him. He can't quite see her at this point. Izanami spat at Izanagi and informed him it was too late. This is interesting if you know comparison of myth. She had already eaten the food of the underworld. And she now belonged to the land of the dead. Does anyone know the Demeter and Persephone myth, where Persephone ate the pomegranate? Yes, so interesting. It's interesting how you get some parallels in these various myths. So Izanagi was shocked, but he refused to give in to her wishes to be left in Yomi. Izanami finally agreed to return, but first she requested time to rest. She instructed Izanagi not to come into her bedroom. After a long wait, Izanami did not come out of her bedroom, and Izanagi became worried and went in. While Izanami was sleeping, he took the comb that bound his hair and set it as light as a torch so he could see her. Under the burst of light, he saw what once was the beautiful Izanami, her flesh now ravaged and rotting and infested with maggots. Purity, impurity. Okay? You might be beautiful when you're 23 or 24, but eventually. So, crying out loud, Izanagi could no longer control his fear, and he started to run, intending to return to the living and abandon his death-ridden wife. Izanami woke up shrieking and chased after him. She then instructed the foul women to hunt for frightened Izanagi and bring him back. This is an interesting myth because there's a struggle here between life and death going on, which is always part of our struggle, isn't it? We're always sort of this struggle between life and death. They began to chase, but Izanagi began to hurl peaches at them. Peaches, I'm not sure why. He knew this would not delay them for long, but he was nearly free, for the boundary of Yomi was now close at hand. Finally, he burst into the light, pushed a boulder against the entrance, okay, sealing off death, keeping death away. Wonderful image. Izanami, on the other side, screamed from behind the barrier and told Izanagi that if he left her, she would destroy 1,000 living people every day. He replied that he would give life to 1,500. And that's actually why the population continues to go up when you see the enormous amount of death every day. And so began the existence of human death. That's the explanation in the Shinto myth of how death came about. It tells us a great deal about the Shinto view of death. Death is not seen in terms of wages of sin. Rather, it's a result of one kami's curse. The curse of Izanagi. But this is followed by a counter curse of life affirmation. So it's two curses that are in conflict with one another. Finally, and very significantly for Shinto tradition, the terror of death is not depicted in terms of divine punishment, but decay. Decay. That's what is really seen as the terrible thing about death. Not that you're going to be punished somewhere, but that's going to be you somehow, or at least part of you. So death is thus a pollution which needs to be avoided, just like in Zoroastrianism. And when the spirits are offended because of exposure to pollution, they can create a lot of havoc and misery. So you want to keep anything that's impure, especially death, away from your sacred sites. You will never find a dead body near a Shinto shrine. The Shinto shrine is pure. The dead body is impure. The spirit, your kami, is pure. But the body is impure. So, if you've ever been to a Shinto shrine, you might notice that there are ropes around them. These are called Shimenawa. These are to mark off the area that is sacred, and nothing impure should come inside of those. So has anyone ever seen sumo wrestling? You know, no, but if you ever notice, there's salt around the edge of the ring. Salt is one way of keeping away impurity. Actually, if you walk into a Japanese restaurant in Tokyo, you may see a little thing of salt sitting out there. You might wonder what that's about. It's a symbol to keep out impurity. Now, so the shrines are so how do you have a funeral? You don't. The Buddhists take care of that. Most people who have a Shinto tradition will be buried through a Buddhist ceremony. It's sometimes said, married Shinto, buried Buddhist. And if you've ever been to Japan, you'll see those lovely marriage ceremonies marked. Those are Shinto. So even the Buddhists will get a Shinto marriage. It's like your Shinto marriage buried Buddhist. If there is a funeral, it won't be anywhere near the shrine, and there won't be any priests involved. It will just be lay people. Why? Priest can't get around that impurity. Yeah. So when there are Shinto funerals, and they're kind of rare. The Buddhists take care of death. The Buddhists take care of death in Japan. There is a period, but if there is this is called the purification wand. If I was up here, I would be. It's sort of the salt of I would be, and it's interesting. I came across a guy that was buying a new car, and there was the priest doing it. Making sure it's pure, So the mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, is done usually in a stoic manner. It's supposed to be a time of reflection on life. Family and friends will typically visit the crematorium or the mausoleum every week. The bodies are usually cremated. As we saw earlier, people will set up shrines in their homes, and there will be annual rituals to the dead individual. So if my father were to die, today's his birthday. Yeah. I shouldn't be here doing that. I should be home in front of my little, and I will when I go home, making some sort of remembrance of him on this day. Okay.
The Mexican culture, the Hispanic culture does the Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead, yeah.
What's the same?
Yeah, we tend to think the dead are gone.
Yeah.
Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're hovering in some way, at least spiritually, or within your head.
Like tomorrow is Mother's Day. It's in Mexico. They celebrate with the Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's the #1 holiday.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day.
As it should be. Okay. Concepts of the afterlife changed over time. Again, very much influenced by Buddhism. Buddhism brought in the ideas of what they call the Pure Land, which we would say is the heaven, and the hellish regions. And Shinto believers sort of incorporated this into their religious beliefs. What's interesting about Japan is you really see what we call syncretism, where two religions have come together and influenced each other. It's very striking. In fact, often, if this whole campus was, you'd have a Shinto shrine at one end and a Buddhist temple at the other. And they wouldn't see that as being conflict. I mean, it's just different aspects.
Is it an evolution of religion?
Yeah. But they do believe in these ghost spirits. And if you believe in ghost spirits, as in Mexico in the Day of the Dead, you better have some way of dealing with them. You know, they like to be treated well. So there are all sorts of rituals related to these spirits. So if you think of Shinto, think of spirit. I think kami is the word. Spirit is everywhere. Spirit, kami, and also purity and pollution. And if you ever go, there are just some beautiful shrines. Beautiful, beautiful shrines. Okay, we're going to turn now to Mormonism. This is kind of a sort of a sharp turn here. Yeah.
You might want to mention that before you go into the shrine, there's a long water and a cup, and you cleanse yourself.
Yeah, there's the shrine, Buddhist and Shinto. There'll be long. You take the ladle and you put usually on your hands or sometimes over your head. Yeah, purity. Well, we do that. Yeah. We do that. Yeah. The notion of water as being a purification element. Okay, let's go to Mormonism. Yeah, I'm trying to. When was the last time I taught Shinto and Mormonism in the same class? It's a challenge. Anyway, okay. So Mormonism. In Mormon, I'm not going to go through all the Mormon beliefs. This is more their ideas about death. They believe that the spirit separates from the body at death. After death, all individuals will enter a spirit realm, a holding room. A holding room. They'll all go to one place initially to await what? The second coming. Okay. Because it's strongly believed in Mormonism that Jesus will return, second coming. So when you die, all the spirits go to one place initially, a holding room, waiting for the second coming. During that time, non-believers will have the opportunity to learn about the Mormon faith and repent their sins. Okay. So everyone's... after the second coming, people will then be separated into 3 levels of heaven based on their faith, their choices, and their actions. So according to Mormons, heaven is a 3-story building. Individuals go to these kingdoms depending on the level of their degree of faith and their earthly works. So there are the 3 kingdoms, the celestial, the terrestrial, and the telestial. Now, do you notice something up in the upper left-hand corner? What does that say? Pre-mortal existence. Your spirit existed before your body. It's with creation that your spirit gets a body, according to Mormons. There's this large spirit world, it's always there, and those spirits are continually being brought into creation by being given a body. So, when you die... What's that?
The birth of the child must be very important.
Yes, yeah, that's when you get your body. Okay. So here are the three kingdoms. The celestial kingdom is the highest. It will be the residence of those who have been righteous, accepted the teachings of Jesus Christ, and made and lived up to the required ordinance and covenants during their mortal lives. What are the ordinances and covenants? They're the teachings of the Mormon faith. So if that's the requirement, only Mormons will be in the top level. And this celestial kingdom will also be the permanent residence of God and Jesus. So the Mormons who have followed the covenants, etc., they will be at the highest level with God and Jesus. The founder of the church, Joseph Smith, taught that the celestial kingdom itself is then subdivided into 3 other degrees. And only those, now this is interesting, at least it is to me, only those individuals who are sealed in celestial marriage in a Mormon temple will enter the highest degree of the celestial kingdom. You have to be married in a Mormon temple. And when you are married under the covenant, you are married forever. And only if you're married in the temple will you be in the highest of the highest. If you're not, you're just married normally, you may be in the celestial, but you're not in the suite. I shouldn't say that's not fair. That's not fair. In any case, so people live there will become exalted and permitted to live the kind of life God lives. And this is interesting, as literal gods and goddesses over their own worlds. They will be given worlds just like God and Jesus have this world. That's for the highest of the high. You have to be a good Mormon. You have to be in what they call endowed in the temple and married in the temple in a celestial marriage. Now, that's the celestial. Then what about the terrestrial kingdom? What is ter? What's the word ter? Earth, right? Celestial is, ter will be on earth, actually. So it's the terrestrial kingdom. Includes those who died without the law. They were honorable people, but who allowed themselves to be blinded to the needs of this world and were not valiant in their testimonies of Jesus Christ. So it's a lower level, but it's sort of a spirit level that'll be on earth, not above. Most good people will be there, as well as Mormons who didn't quite make the mark in terms of the other requirements. It's a spirit world located here on earth in what might be termed another dimension. Sort of like the Shinto spirits. There will be spirits, but they won't have bodies. It's sort of interesting. It's very complex eschatological thinking here. It's all these divisions. Yeah, Chris?
Did people in the celestial kingdom have bodies?
They will get their. It's a spirit body. Yes, they will have bodies. That's why it's important to have a body. For Mormons, it's very important to have a body. No. So that in the spirit world located on here, individuals will receive what they say, they'll have glory, but not fullness. It's the B plus rather than the A. Okay, you're not at the highest level. They will receive the presence of the Son, but not the fullness of the Father. So it's all these symbols to sort of say that it's ranking your afterlife. Wherefore they are bodies terrestrial and not bodies celestial, and differ in glory as the moon differs from the sun. It's not a bad place to be, actually. I mean, the Mormons aren't about real about hellish. Then there's the third, the telestial. Includes those who receive not the gospel of Christ, not the testimony of Jesus, and it also includes liars and evildoers. Because of their faults, these individuals will remain in spirit prison for 1,000 years. It's all kind of detailed. It's really amazing if you read this stuff. After 1,000 years, they will be resurrected and receive an immortal body, and then be assigned to the celestial kingdom.
But what happens if the second coming of Christ comes before?
Oh, you cause problems, don't you? Yeah. It's all worked out, I'll tell you. It's all worked out. But like I said, the celestial kingdom isn't like the tortures of hell. It's not like that. It's just a place where you don't have the presence of God. You have a lot of people around you who probably aren't all that nice. It's just like here. It's like here. Forever. Forever. It's like here forever. Yeah. Yeah.
So what happens after 1,000 years?
They get out of the prison, the real bad ones, and then they can come. See, there's no eternal hell. No, they go to the telestial. Some of the telestial may go to the terrestrial, but none of them will go to the celestial. The terrestrial and the telestial sort of flow back and forth. But for a Mormon, you don't want to talk terrestrial, telestial. You want celestial, because that's when you'll be with God and Jesus and and Joseph Smith and all the Mormons. Okay, there's one place that they do. It's called perdition, for those whose wickedness is beyond almost repair and never repent. So they have a little room for that, but it's sort of realized that if you can repent, you're probably going to repent. Why would you not repent? In any case,
What do they say? Forgiveness is divine.
Yep. So, in terms of funerals, etc., it should be held within 7 days of the passing. If someone is endowed, it means they have participated in a temple ritual. Not just any church ritual, but there are Mormon temples, and then there are Mormon places of worship. Where's the main temple? Salt Lake City. Okay, and there's a big one in San Diego. Okay, beautiful temples. Okay. So there are special rituals, and they're secret usually. They're supposed to be secret. These are called endowment rituals, which takes you to a certain level of Mormon membership. The reason I mention that, generally in terms of a funeral, if a funeral director is not a Mormon, usually they're going to go to a Mormon funeral director. Hopefully he's endowed as well, not just a regular Mormon, because that gives a special, what might we say, special privilege, but the dead therefore gets a special ritual that can only be given by the endowed. And if you've been endowed as a Mormon, you're buried in those. How many people are aware that endowed Mormons wear those garments underneath? Always. Yeah, always. These are the temple garments. They're believed to be signs. You remember your sacred nature by your garments. I guess if you want to get a little bit superstitious, they're seen to protect you. I think I mentioned in the Zoom class on Native Americans when they did the famous ghost, the Sioux did the ghost dance to keep the Americans away. It's thought, they said they could wear ghost garments, jackets, that would protect them from the bullets. I sort of wonder where that came from, because it's not really part of Native American culture. A lot of thought is that their contact with the Mormons, who had taught them about these sacred garments, may have well influenced the Indian chief, who then went ahead and proposed this. Unfortunately, they didn't work. You've heard of the Battle of Wounded Knee? Yeah, that was... So in any case, this is what you're buried in these garments. The church provides the garments, which are holy, sacred undergarments. These are sacred. You got to remember that. Women are typically buried in long-sleeve dresses, stockings, and shoes, while men are buried with white suits, ties, and shoes. But they got their undergarments on. However, if the deceased wasn't endowed, they can't have the undergarments. So there's a very great importance put in the Mormon religion of having these endowed rituals taking place in the temple. And if they can take place in Salt Lake City, that's top notch.
So if they get married in a Mormon church but not a temple, then they're not able to ascend into the celestial.
Right, and they won't have each other for eternity, which it might be a... Maybe you don't want to be married in the temple. I know. Because even in our vows, what does it say? Until death do us part. Not for the celestial Mormon. No. Yeah. Okay. So typically a bishop will oversee, there will be a viewing at the service. This is very common. Then the bishop will lead prayers, scriptural readings. Following the funeral, there will be a trip, of course, to the cemetery. Depending on, this is something from a well-known Mormon. Usually they're smaller families. Not lots of crowds going to the cemetery. I believe this was might have been actually one of the Mormon prophets who died, and so everyone went to that funeral. They'll dedicate a plot as the final resting place, have a prayer, and then there's a group known as Mormon Relief Societies. These were women's organizations. They go way back to the beginning, in the middle of the 19th century. They will host a post-funeral feast called a mercy meal. And they will generally serve what are known as funeral potatoes. They look yummy, yeah. It just became part of the tradition from funeral potatoes that were served at these after burial events put on by the women's group. The friends gather, it's an informal setting, celebrate the life of their loved one. Now, the last thing I want to say about Mormons before we move to Baha'i, a very interesting practice. Baptism for the dead. Has anyone heard of this? Mormons have a practice of baptizing the dead. That is why they have these great genealogies. You go to Salt Lake City, they're some of the most complete genealogies anywhere in the world, not just for Mormons. In fact, wasn't a group from the church went, Lynn, and they went, to get these genealogical records. Well, you might wonder, why are these kept? Because it's the belief that the dead can be baptized. And you have a proxy. Someone is baptized for you. So if, let's say I wanted let's say I was a Mormon, or I don't even know, let's say my father, I would go and be baptized for him, and that means that he is baptized. Because for Mormons, the only way you can get to any of the kingdoms of heaven, terrestrial or celestial, is to be baptized. So they see this actually as acts of mercy. You see how, do you see the reasoning? You guys have not been baptized. I care about you. You're all dead. I will be baptized for you. And then you can enter the celestial kingdom.
It seems that their system separates people instead of...
It does. It separates people. The only good thing is that the separations aren't heaven in. I mean, there's no torture or people. The better will be higher, and the others will be there. And it's nothing that is torturous, as you see in some other Christian notions or even Islamic notions. It is, it's kind of exclusive. You come to me, but come to me. Come to my Mormon religion.
Ladies?
I'm just wondering how it is today with young people. Are there statistics out there that show
they stay.
what young
Mormons?
under the age of 20,
Mormons are some of the most loyal. They stay. They have their missions where the young boys go out for 2 years and then they come back. And the girls have now been added, my accountant, well, he's not our, what is he? What is Dennis? He's our executive of Chris's father's trust. He went on a mission with Mitt Romney in France. So they're very family oriented. They're one of the fastest growing religions in the world. They sort of leveled off a bit. And when you look at, I don't like to be judgmental, but when you look at some of the theology and some of these, you say, how does it? Because they've got family unit and they are very supportive of each other and of community.
It's interesting because we went to a Mormon funeral where you just went, right? Jim Maddox and his wife. And all the grandkids get up, they sing together. It's a real family.
They're very family oriented, very, of course, there are not good Mormons as well as they're not, but I remember when we'd go river rafting and we'd find out that the guys, the young boys that were doing our river were Mormons, I felt very much better.
What are some people that objected to?
Yeah, let me say that the other side of this was the problem the Mormons got especially with Jews. Because they started baptizing people and also those who had died in the Holocaust. This became a very controversial issue. The Jewish and Mormon leaders at first devised a pact to stop all baptisms of dead Jews in 1995, but shortly thereafter the church reneged. The trouble is, how do you know? This isn't done publicly. This is done behind closed doors, as it was. I should mention that it started with Joseph Smith. He started the practice back in the 1840s. The idea of and his notion was we want everyone to be brought up to a certain degree, so we'll baptize everybody, even if they've died. Because it was one of the big problems in Christian theology early on was what happened to people who were born before Jesus. That became a problem. Well, Joseph Smith answered it by saying, well, we will baptize them. Okay. In 2010, the Jewish and LDS leaders agreed to halt baptisms, specifically of Holocaust victims. Abraham Foxman, who was the leader of the Anti-Defamation League, likened the situation to earlier quarrels between Jews and the Catholic Church. Okay, let's finish up, we've got about 10, 15 minutes, with the Baha'i faith. Religion which originated in Iran, 19th century, based on the teachings of one Mirza Husaym-AU, known as Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah in Arabic means the light of God. Baha, the light, Allah, God, the light of God. There are pictures of Baha'u'llah. I will not show one because Baha'is ask that not be done, and I will respect that. But that's his name in fancy calligraphy.
Well, when I went to seminary in Illinois, the Baha'i temple that you showed was just north of Evanston.
It's in Wilmette, yeah. Wilmette, yeah.
I went there. I saw the outside of it. I didn't go in.
Yeah.
But it's quite a stately building.
It is. And Baha'is have 9 temples, one on each continent. There's a major one in New Delhi. It's called the Lotus Temple. It's just gorgeous. It's done in the shape of lotus petals. Yeah. But it came from Iran. It came out of a Shia Islamic background, although many of its teachings came out of that background. It is much more universalized, those teachings. So it believes in the oneness of religion, for example. It believes that all religions teach some truth and that religion evolves. In Shia Islam, there's the notion of the return of the hidden imam, which would be similar to the return of Christ in Christianity. That's where the Baha'i faith fit into that Shia metaphysics, because a forerunner of Baha'u'llah and Baha'u'llah are seen to be, as it were, the second coming of Christ or the hidden imam. That's how they tied into the old tradition. However, as is the case with most messianic movements, what happens to leaders of messianic movements? They get killed or exiled, and that's what happened to many of the Baha'is. Many of the Baha'is were killed. Baha'u'llah himself was sent out of Iran. He ended up in Akka. Does anyone know where Akka is? It's in Israel today. It used to be spelled A-C-R-E. It's just outside of Haifa. And this was the prison that he was kept in for most of his life. Interestingly, when he was there, he wrote letters to all the kings of the world, telling them to get their act together and to unify. They didn't listen. He warned them, if you don't, the consequences will be terrible. So anyway, let's move to teachings of death, because that's what we're here for. What they did, it's interesting, they moved beyond the more traditional Islamic idea. Do you remember the Islamic idea was bodily resurrection? Very similar to early Christianity. At the final day of judgment, there would be bodily resurrection. Baha'is believe in an eternal soul. So they took much more what we said was the Greek model, separation of body and soul. When the body dies, it disintegrates. The soul, however, is eternal. This is the image that they use, and I think it's a nice one. They compare physical death to the destroying of a bird's cage. The cage is your body. When that dies, the bird flies off. Yeah. Baha'i writings compare it to the bird's cage when you destroy the cage, and instead the bird experiences even greater feelings and heightened perceptions. So Baha'is talk about this world being a sort of very limited in terms of our eternal perceptions. Once our spirit is freed, it's a much different view of existence. In fact, the Baha'i writings refer to death as a messenger of joy. The messenger of joy. Because what does it do? It releases you from here so that your spirit can go to the eternal. The progress of a person's soul in the afterlife is based on their deeds on earth, help from family and friends, what we call prayer, as well as the grace of God. But what's interesting, it's a sort of evolution. It isn't a final state. A lot of the religions say there's a heaven and there's a hell, and that's the state. The Baha'i teachings say the spirit evolves eternally towards God because God is eternal. So it's a continual process of growth that will last forever. In any case, like most religions, the teachings relate that actions in the world do have an effect on the soul in the afterlife. Good deeds result in peace of mind, peace of soul, Negative actions result in the opposite. So the soul will be called to account. But some of the writings suggest that who's doing the accounting? You, because of your conscience. You know. So when you know, especially when it's put before you, this is what you did or didn't do. Your own soul, because it's believed to be spiritual, will do the judging, actually. You don't need someone outside you. In terms of heaven and hell, these are taken metaphorically rather than literally. In Baha'i understanding, heaven is a state of closeness to God, both in this life and the other world. Hell, on the other hand, is a state of being separated from God. Baha'i funerals and burials are simple, consisting of only just a few rituals. The body should be wrapped in a simple shroud made of silk or cotton. This follows the Islamic tradition. Additionally, you may have a ring placed on your finger. And the inscription reads, "I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate." That's what the ring says. Baha'i funerals will typically be closed casket. If you go to a Baha'i funeral, you won't have a viewing. This is because Baha'i burial laws disallow embalming. The funeral service contains only one prayer. It's called the Prayer of the Dead. It goes like this. "My God, this is thy servant and the son of thy servant, who hath believed in thee and thy signs, and set his face towards thee, wholly detached from all except thee. Thou art verily of those who show mercy, the most merciful. Deal with him," that's the dead one, "O thou who forgivest the sins of men and concealest their faults, as beseemeth the heaven of thy bounty and the ocean of thy grace." Yeah, it's often said in Baha'i writings that God is the concealer of your faults. Thank God. Like the Baha'i funeral service, the burial is simple, straightforward. There are a few interesting laws, however, which one should follow for burying the dead. This is interesting. It is forbidden to bury a person's body more than an hour away from where the person died. This applies to air, land, or sea travel. Yeah. I think the idea was, as in Islam, you shouldn't make a big thing of the funeral. The body is there. You should bury it as soon as possible. And you have people then taking bodies, keeping them, transporting them. Right. Cremation is discouraged, not disallowed, but very much discouraged. The largest Baha'i community in the world is in India. So you're going to get cremation. You're going to get cremation. And this is something that I think Baha'is, all religions are having to come to terms with this. Because as more and more people, cremation in terms of percentage has just, in the last 50 years, is just, some for practical reasons. You see what a plot costs, a coffin costs? I mean, some people cannot afford that. And also the idea that, it's simple, it's easier, it's quick, it's clean. In any case, they will again say the congregation for the dead Casket should be made of stone or hard wood. So if you're going to have a casket, have a good one. Don't get the cheap version. The Baha'i headstones are typically sparse and simple, though they may feature special emblems or quotes in addition to the individual's name. According to Baha'i teachings, it is recommended that believers who have deceased loved ones and the community of the whole should remember the dead on a regular basis. In this regard, Baha'is believe a person who has passed away can continue to impact the progress and advancement of people on earth. That souls do interact somehow. And because they have influence over our lives, it is important to offer them assistance and prayer at regular intervals. If a family wishes to hold a memorial gathering for someone who has passed away, they are encouraged to do so on an annual basis. Remember the dead. Remember the dead. So that...
I just wanted to mention that a very good friend of ours in Australia, who's a Baha'i, had on his headstone a quote from the Baha'i writings.
Speak up, because
He had a quote from the Baha'i writings which said, where there is love, nothing is too much trouble, and there is always time.
Great man. Great man.
He was a lovely person.
Lovely person.
We just spoke to his wife, who's still living. She's 102 now. And the last time I talked to Nan, she said, I want to go with my big fella. Because Ray was a big guy. And she's been without him for, 30-some years now? Yeah. I want to go with my... That's in a very Australian saying, the big fella. Okay, that sort of sums it up. Remember, next week we won't have a class because we're going to take a week off. And then Reverend Albert will be here to speak about... I think Dorothy Day and maybe one other person, I'm not sure. We're probably going to do 2 individuals each week. For the Buddhists, I'll speak about Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama. For Islam, Abdul After Khan, which probably many of you have not heard of, a Muslim disciple of Gandhi, and a Baha'i poet by the name of Tahirih, a lady. And then for, what have I left? Hinduism, I will speak about, how many people want to know more about Gandhi? Because a lot of you people know quite a bit. But Tagore, the great poet, I'm going to talk about Tagore. And then I'm trying to decide one other Hindu person. You'll have to, that'll be a surprise. Okay.